Hey guys, how are you? Welcome in. Welcome into the live. Hey Jan, hey Judy. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Hello, hi. I'm Tanya or TitaniumBuilt. And if you're a returning Titan or subscriber, welcome on back for yet another live, another day live. We're doing another day live today. Hopefully it'll be nice and full like it was yesterday. So if you guys wouldn't mind just taking a second to hit the like button, it does help. It helps a lot. And it's free to do. Also, if you would like to join our channel membership, it does help the channel grow. It helps, the channel stay afloat, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. So we're going to talk about Delphi. Yes, sweatshirt weather is here. It really is. But I put this on and now I'm warm. I'm like, and the sleeves don't come up that far. So now I'm a little warm, but I got another two-piece outfit on. I love two-piece outfits in the fall, and in the winter, you'll see me in that a lot. Comfortable. That's what I like to be. I think it's because I wore jeans and like dressed up and stuff for work for so long. Now that I can do YouTube and I do like my boutique, I really don't have to dress up as much. It's pretty nice, actually. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind just taking a second to hit the like button, it does help. And we will get into the documents. So we're almost finished finally with the 136-page document that the defense came out with. I believe it was only the 13th that they dropped the document. We've been reading over it here on the channel, and it's plentiful, I would say. I would say it's plentiful. There's a lot to it. So the first half of it, like the first part, was pretty gruesome. And then after that, the defense has just been saying, like, these are the people they believe were involved in these murders. And it wasn't Richard Allen. It was the Odinists. And they're pointing their fingers to certain people too. So they just don't seem to care, which if it's all true, then it would be, then it's going to be, I don't know. Then I don't know what I'm going to think. But I'm hoping that it's not true. I'm hoping that those girls, that crime scene wasn't that gruesome. If you guys were here for the first part, you'll hear about the crime scene and stuff, what the defense is saying that the crime scene it looked like. And I don't know how much the defense can lie on those papers. I need to talk to a defense attorney, because between this case and Idaho, we have a lot of legal documents we read, and I feel like I need to know how much the defense can, or like either side, the state or the defense, are they allowed to tweak it a little bit, lie a little, like the police can lie a little, in interrogation, or does it have to be the truth, like at least as they know it? So I'm just wondering about that. Hey Ina, hey Music City Mom, welcome in. Get my glasses on here so I can read a little better. So, where do I find the Prosecutor podcast? I don't know what that one is. Oh, she's talking to Judy. I'm like, I don't know what that is. So this is going to be part 4, and it's Odinists in Westville, and that's where they are housing Richard Allen right now, is Westville Correctional. So, and he is being housed in a prison, not a jail, and we're not sure why. I'm thinking it's because it has a higher security, but I'm not sure of. Maybe they don't have a separate housing unit in their jail for somebody that's on trial for this kind of a crime, because they have to be separated from the general public. So after his arrest, Richard Allen was forced to be housed in Westville Correctional Facility based upon a safekeeping order. And we know what they're going to talk about probably in this part of the document about how he looked. And so the prosecution is saying that, Richard Allen was given food. He just wasn't eating. He was refusing to sleep. He was eating paper after his attorneys would give him like documents. He was eating the paper so that no one could see it. He broke his tablet because he was angry. And that was all after he confessed to his wife in April that he did, in fact, commit this crime. So, take that with what you will. Hey, Harlot, welcome in. So on April 3rd, 2023, two of the transport guards walking Richard to and from his visit prominently displayed multiple patches on their Department of Corrections uniform. The top patch, "In Odin We Trust," was displayed under their embroidered name tags on the right side of their Department of Corrections uniform shirt. On the left side of their DOC uniform shirts were two patches. The lower of the two patches consisted of a partial American flag and interlocking triangles. The interlocking triangles is a common symbol for those involved in the pagan Odinite religion. Above this American flag / interlocking triangle patch was a patch that proclaimed, "I hate people." Hold on a second, my dog's snoring. Mia, are you okay? She was having a weird dream, sorry. Mia. The interlocking triangles is a common symbol for those involved in the pagan Odinite religion. Above this American flag / interlocking triangle patch was a patch that proclaimed, "I hate people." And there are images below. Below are images of those patches. In spite of the fact that for over 5 months, from November 2022 through April 3rd, 2023, Richard Allen's defense team had been able to bring in their phones when visiting Richard Allen. After Richard's defense team showed photographs of a decrepit Richard Allen at Westville, Warden Gallipo apparently issued an order that Richard's defense team were no longer allowed to bring in their phones. Oh, we do know the picture that they're referring to. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. It was really bad. There we go. Pulled kind of like right up there. But I don't know if there's a... Let's see if there's like a... Well, this is kind of a before, but... Okay, we'll just do this one. Okay, so this is him when he went in. First went in. And then this is the picture that his attorneys took of him a few months later. I shouldn't have switched those back and forth so fast, but I'll switch it back too. So yeah, I mean, he definitely looks a little different. And then there's him again. Yeah, Nancy. Oh gosh, you've been listening to the Letitia Charles. I haven't listened to him. I hate that woman. I really do. I don't even want to ever hear her voice again. Oh man. Why did she? I mean, like, she's evil. That woman's evil. But I'm sure she's talking good stuff because, you know, she's got like 8 different personalities as she claims. So it says, "I hate people that, okay, sorry, I read that part. Okay, because Richard's defense team were no longer able to bring in their phones, the defense team was not able to take photographs or video of these patches after April 3rd, 2023. Therefore, the defense is providing affidavits from members of Richard Allen's defense team that viewed these patches on multiple occasions after April 3rd, 2023. So I'm wondering, did they get a picture of the patch before April 3rd, 2023? Because if they don't have a picture of it at all, then I don't believe it. Because you would have taken a picture as soon as you saw it. So they just said that people from their own attorney's office is going to testify. That you can't be doing that. Here are the patches worn by the guards. The images below of the patches worn by Sergeant Robinson and Jones were found on Etsy. These patches can be purchased off of Etsy. So if anyone wants to make an Etsy order. Now, when they're coming in wearing these new patches on their uniform, someone's going to take notice of that. You know, like someone's going to notice that, I would say. And they would be like, "You're out of uniform. Like, what the heck's on? What's that badge on your shirt?" That's what I would say. I'd be like, what is that? What's going on there? I'm sure that they do get checked at certain times. They probably get, just like with any job, when you go in, people look over your uniform. I would assume that they do that at corrections, for corrections officers as well. I know when I worked at a restaurant, it was a restaurant, I would get looked over. My clothes would get looked over. Like, up, down, are you good? Do you have your black socks on? If they're white, nope, that won't work. Even though you have pants on, that makes sense. But, you know, they would always check your uniform. So, and then here's the I hate people patch. The first time that Richard defense team noticed Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson and the patches shown above they were worn on their DOC uniform was on April 3rd, 2023. Oh, okay. So they noticed them. This also coincides with the time frame that Richard Allen's mental health began a steep decline. Well, no, because on April 3rd, isn't that when he confessed to his wife too? April 3rd, I think, was when he... I know it was the first week of April. From that point forward, April 3rd, 2023, these two guards, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones, seemed inseparable from Richard Allen. Odinist Correction Officer Robinson and Jones would walk Richard Allen to and from his attorney's visits, as well on one occasion when Richard visited with his wife, always wearing these embroidered patches. Well, it seems to me they're just doing their job, walking him back and forth. They can't just let him out of the cell and say, yeah, go ahead, meet your attorney around the corner down the block. That's fine. We trust you. For a period, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were also videotaping Richard Allen and his interactions with his attorneys. This ended only upon a complaint by Richard's attorneys after several visits. Additionally, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were always close enough to Richard to be assured that Richard did not feel comfortable talking to his attorneys or his wife without knowing that these Odinist guards were his lawyers or wife. Max Barker and Matt Hoffman have both been a part of Richard Allen's defense team since December 2020 and have met with Richard on several occasions. Paragraph 10 of Max Barker's affidavit provides insight into some of what was going on at Westville with Odinist guards Jones and Robinson. So this is someone from the attorney's office sworn statement. During one memorable visit on May 4th, 2023, myself, Attorney Baldwin, and Attorney Rossi met with Richard Allen to discuss matters involving the case. At this time, Richard Allen was in a mental and physical state of deterioration and was nearly non-communicative. During the visit, Richard Allen repeatedly asked whether or not his wife was okay and if his family was okay. He claimed on a couple of occasions that they were going to kill him. When asked who he was referring to as they, Richard Allen responded by saying the guys with the Odin patches. Up to this point in the legal process, Richard Allen's defense team had never mentioned Odinists or an Odinism to Richard Allen, neither directly or indirectly. The first time I'm aware of any mention of Odinist involvement to Richard Allen was during a visit on August 25th, 2023, when Kathy Allen attended and a discussion occurred between attorney and client regarding ties to the crime scene. At an August 10th, 2023 deposition, the defense finally revealed to Jerry Holman, one of the main investigators on this case, that the defense knew that the evidence exposed the high likelihood that Odinists committed these murders by laying out the evidence right in front of Holman. Up until that time, the defense had strategically played dumb about possessing any knowledge of the Odinist involvement. This strategy was in place for many reasons. However, the defense finally revealed its knowledge to Jerry Holman on August 10th, 2023. 1 week later, during his first attorney visit since that August 10th, 2023 deposition, Sergeant Robinson dropped Rick off at an attorney meeting. Sergeant Jones was absent on this visit. However, something else was also different on this visit. Notably missing from Sergeant Robinson's uniform were the Odinist patches that Richard's defense team had taken note of on every attorney visit ever since April 3rd, 2023. Perhaps not so coincidentally, after Jerry Holman became aware of the defense's team's knowledge of the Odinist involvement in the murders, magically those patches were removed from Robinson's uniform, leaving blank spots where the patches used to be displayed on the very next attorney visit. The defense would remind the court that also perhaps not so coincidentally, Tony Liggett was the only person that refused to support the transport of Richard Allen out of Westville when other options, Cass County, were available. Liggett cited as his sole reason for rejecting Richard Allen being moved from Westville to Cass County, Logansport, is that he would have difficulty transporting Richard Allen to Delphi from Logansport for hearing and trial, a distance of less than 20 miles. Certainly, state police were available to assist in transport if Carroll County could not. Yet Liggett refused to agree to the transport, leaving Richard Allen in Westville guarded by Odinists. When factoring everything contained in this memorandum, Liggett's objection to moving Richard Allen to Cass County over transportation concerns is troubling, especially when the patches were moved after the depots. Also filed contemporaneously with the Franks motion and memorandum is the defense's emergency request to transport Richard Allen out of Westville to the Cass County Jail, despite Tony Liggett's objection to the same. As the defense has legitimate concerns of Richard's safety once this motion and memorandum are filed. So next section will be beyond Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson wearing in Odinite We Trust patches, what else links them to Odinism? Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson's relationship with Odinism went beyond the patches that they each proudly displayed while transporting Richard Allen to and from his attorney visits. So Sergeant Robinson, on his Facebook page, Sergeant Robinson does not hide his devotion to Odinism. On June 25th, 2023, Robinson posted a photo of what the defense would call an altar featuring horns, antlers, and Thor's hammer, and a dish atop some type of animal fur, with various runes decorating the outer edges of the dish. All of these items were placed on what appears to be a circular wooden platter. It appears that Sergeant Jones liked Sergeant Robinson's Odin altar post. Sergeant Robinson's altar to Odin is similar to an altar to Odin posted by Brad Holder. As stated by Max Baker in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson was involved in transporting Richard Allen to most, if not all, of his attorney visits. Sergeant Robinson always wore his Odin patches. However, that changed following Holman's contentious August 10th, 2023 deposition. In that deposition, which has been attached and provided to the court as an exhibit, about 2/3 of the way through the deposition, Holman begins getting called out by the Defense for Unified Command's incompetent handling of the Odinine aspect of the investigation. It was also at that point in the deposition that the defense began asking critical questions concerning the way that Unified Command handled the investigation of Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Johnny Messer, and Elvis Fields. You will note that nowhere in the deposition did the defense reveal to Holman that the defense was aware that Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were wearing the "In Odine We Trust" patches. Why didn't they put it in there? Attorney Rossi and the defense member, Matt Baker, visited Richard Allen on August 17, 2023, only 7 days after the contentious deposition with Holman, in which it became obvious that the defense was fully aware of the strong evidence that Odinist committed the murders. At this August 17, 2017 visitation, as Max Barker states in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson was no longer wearing the patch. The defense team has no direct knowledge as to whether Jerry Holman or anyone from Unified Command contacted Sergeant Robinson or anyone else from Westville to alert them that the Rick's defense team was fully aware that evidence supported Odinist being involved in the ends. However, it is certainly a curiosity that deserves attention and consideration. As Max Baker also describes in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson was always within a few feet of Richard Allen during Richard's meetings with his wife, Kathy. The 2 visits that Richard had with his wife were without the hustle and bustle and noise of other inmates during their visitation. While Warden Gallipo may claim the Westville was doing Richard a favor by allowing him privacy with his wife, the defense views it differently. With no other inmates in the room was completely quiet. Sergeant Robinson could hear everything that Richard told his wife. Certainly, Robinson and Jones stood close enough to Richard to intimidate Richard from talking openly and honestly to his wife about what was going on at Westville. Additionally, in their combined 50-plus years of practicing criminal defense, attorneys Baldwin and Rossi have never had their purported confidential attorney visits videotaped with a handheld camcorder. Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson, beginning April 3rd, 2023, began videotaping Richard Allen's interactions with his attorneys. Particularly outrageous was the fact that Richard Allen was required to face the camcorder from about 10 feet away through a glass. This means that Richard's mouth was being videotaped. This means that Richard was unable to talk freely to his attorneys and say things like, "They are stating that if I don't tell my wife that I am guilty, then they are going to harm my wife." If Richard were to say anything like that, it would be on video. Remember, Richard Allen continuously asked his defense team if his wife was okay and if his family was okay. The defense has obtained video from the prison. One of the videos that we obtained showed the aftermath of something that happened to Richard Allen. Find attached a still shot of Richard Allen taken from a video that Westville produced. The defense does not have the exact date, but the video indicates that the video was taken between May 26th and May 30th. This still shot is attached to this memorandum and filed as Exhibit 121. The defense is not sure exactly what happened to Richard Allen that caused him to look the way depicted in the still shot, whether it was self-harm or something else. The fact that Richard is being watched by Odinites and the evidence strongly supports Odinite involvement in the murders caused great concern for the defense in terms of Rick's safety. Additionally, in Matt Holman's affidavit, you will find that the last hearing on June 15th, 2023, Rick was constantly pleading with the guards not to shock him. Please don't shock me. Please don't shock me. Please don't shock me. Matt Hoffman indicated that Rick made that comment in front of multiple guards and in front of multiple members of Rick's defense team. Okay. Sergeant Jones. So Sergeant Jones' Facebook post reveal his ties to Odinism. Find attached an image taken from Sergeant Jones' Facebook page marked as Exhibit 122. As you can see, the interlocking triangles that appear on Sergeant Jones' patch also appear in this photo. You will also notice a ruin in the lower left-hand corner of the photo. It is hard to see because it is in black. Also remember that Sergeant Jones liked Sergeant Robinson's altar to Odin. The defense would request the court to review Max Barker's affidavit to learn of Sergeant Jones' involvement in guarding Richard Allen. It is nearly identical to Sergeant Robinson's involvement. Welcome in, everybody. Hey, Candy. Welcome in. Welcome in, Leo. Hey, Cheryl. Welcome in, guys. If I missed you, I'm sorry. Welcome in. Hey, Yankee Kyle. I don't know if I said that or not. Hey, Princess Megalsa. Welcome in. Hope you're doing good, Candy. So, conclusion of part 4. It says they don't teach you in law school what to do when your client who is accused of is being guarded by members of a religious cult who members evidence strongly supports were the actual M's. Yet that is where we are. At some point in time, coincidences cease to be coincidences. The fact that Liggett did not want Richard Allen to be removed from Westville purportedly over transportation issues is curious. The fact that Odinites are guarding Richard is very concerning, or at the very least curious considering the evidence discussed in this memorandum. The fact that Sergeant Robinson stopped wearing his "In Odin We Trust" patches within days of Jerry Holman and the Unified Command learning that the defense was fully aware of the evidence linking Odinists to the crime scene and that Unified Command had avoided investigating Odinist is curious. Again, the court must determine whether Liggett acted intentionally or recklessly when he omitted or lied about information when Liggett drafted the affidavit for search warrant. The defense would ask the court to consider that Liggett objecting to Richard Allen's transfer to Cass County over transportation issues is evidence of intentionality, and that Liggett wanted Allen to remain in Westville, guarded by Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones and any other Odinite that the defense to whom the defense was not learned works at Westville. Has not learned works at Westville. Wow. Okay. So part 5 is pretty short compared to all the other parts. It's only like 6 pages. So we'll go through it really quick. I'm just going to grab my drink. Welcome in. How's everybody doing? Okay. We almost did it. And here I can make it so it's oops. Wrong way. There we go. So it's a little bit bigger for you guys. I should have did that earlier. Sorry about that. So this is part 5. This is the last part. And then I've read you a mini book. Part 5. Richard Allen has no ties to Odinism or any religious cult and has no ties to the crime scene. Yeah, he does. Well, that's a lie right there. What about that bullet? Tony Liggett has testified under oath that there is no DNA linking Richard Allen to the crime scene. Liggett further has testified that he is unaware of anything that links Richard to the crime scene through his phone, computers, or electronics. Liggett has further testified that he is unaware of any evidence that links Richard Allen to any weird religious cult group. Jerry Holman has testified to the following. There is no DNA linking Richard Allen to the crime scene. No DNA extracted from Richard Allen's phone connects him to the M's. No data extracted from Libby's phone connected Richard to the M's. There is no evidence that Richard Allen is or was connected or to any other suspects in this case. There is no evidence found on social media that connects Richard Allen to the crime. There is no evidence extracted from Richard Allen's computers that connects him to the crime. There is no fingerprint evidence that connects Richard Allen to the crime. I'm just calling it a crime because I think YouTube's like, don't say those words because they were like, I don't know, they did something weird to my video yesterday. Like they had limited ads and I was like, I didn't even play a video. We were talking the whole time. That's so weird. So, I mean, they released it, but I think it was because I was using some of the bad words I shouldn't have been using. So we're going to try to do better. But at the same time, you have to say the words if you're talking true crime. It's kind of hard to, like, some of them you can't abbreviate. So, but I'm going to try. This section is very short because there is simply no evidence linking Richard Allen to the crime. However, in his affidavit for search warrant, Liggett attempted to drum up as much connectivity as he could muster between Richard Allen and the M's to convince Judge Denier that it was more likely than not that evidence of the M's would be found in Richard Allen's house and vehicles. Here, essentially, is what Liggett swore and affirmed linked Richard Allen to the crime. So this is what Liggett is saying linked Richard Allen. Number one, Richard was on the trail sometime between 1:30 and 3:30. 2, Richard owns a blue coat. 3, Richard owns guns. 4, Richard owns knives. 5, Liggett's claim while withholding key evidence that a black Ford Focus was parked at the CPS building between 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. Liggett claimed while withholding key evidence that Betsy Blair observed a man on the bridge that Liggett claimed was Richard Allen. Number 7, Liggett's claim while withholding key evidence that Sarah Carball observed a man walking down the road that Liggett claims 1 was Richard Allen and 2 was the same man that Betsy Blair viewed on the high bridge. That is it. That's all. With all the evidence linking Brad Holder, Patrick Westphal, Elvis Fields, Johnny Messer, and Rod Abrams to the M's, as discussed in Part 2, Liggett did not seek a single search warrant for any of those high-level suspects, none. However, 26 days before the election, Liggett made a choice to seek a search warrant for Richard Allen's house based upon the 1 to 7 items above. Let's run through this list one by one. Richard Allen was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30. This single solitary source for this information is Dan Dulin from the Department of Natural Resources. Therefore, in order to confidentially trust that Richard Allen actually said that he was on the trail between 1:30 and 3, Dan Dolan's work product would also have to be trusted. Words matter when talking to someone. For example, if the exchange between Dan Dolan and Richard Allen was this: Richard, we think the girls were abducted between 1:30 and 3:30. Were you on the trail at any point in time between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. on February 17th? Why is the 17th? Do you mean the 13th? I think it was him. And Richard answered yes. That does not mean that Richard Allen was actually on the trail the entire time between 1:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. However, Dolan could memorialize that exchange as Richard claiming he was on the trail the entire 2-hour time span. If so, Dolan's report would be inaccurate. Therefore, Dolan's accuracy in writing reports may need to be considered and scrutinized. The defense does not have to go very far in scrutinizing Dolan's accuracy in report writing. It can start with the report Dolan wrote about his interaction with Richard Allen. The conversation between Richard Allen and Dan Dolan came about when Richard Allen called the tip line to provide the limited information that he may have had from this time on the trail that day. Dolan and Richard met at a grocery store in Delphi. At the conclusion of Dolan's interview with Richard Allen, Dolan prepared his report. However, Dolan screwed up the most basic of tasks, getting the name right. You didn't get the date right just a minute ago, so I don't think you want to be judging. Dolan was so sloppy in drafting this report that he put Richard Allen's name into the system as Rick Allen Whiteman. Before being forced to sell their house and move away from the community that they love because of the horrific allegations that Rick brutally and 2 young girls, Richard Rick Allen and his wife Kathy, lived for many years on Whitman Drive. This is probably the source of Dolan's mistake. Find Exhibit 123, Dolan's unclassified report, which shows DNR officer Dan Dulin identifying Richard Allen as Rick Allen Whiteman in the system. Well, since we can't necessarily trust Dan's accuracy in writing reports, at least there would be a tape recording that would be able to provide the precise words used by Richard Allen. Right, wrong. Find attached Exhibit 124, which is a report provided to the defense in discovery from Dan concerning his interview of Richard Allen. In this report, DNR Dan wrote the following: I checked my audio recordings and cannot find one for him. I will keep looking because I am sure I recorded every interaction I had related to my assigned leads. Oh my gosh, look at that. You've been a member for 6 months, Jan. I love that. Oh, I know. I can't wait till January too. I'm glad that this document came out now, and I hope we don't have any more as long as this one to read before trial starts, because I'm ready for trial too. That's so awesome that you've been here 6 months. That makes me so happy. I love that. Aw. You've been part of our crew for a while. And I'll go ahead and put that in the chat if anyone else would like to become a member. Exactly, Judy. You're very right. RA is the one that went and confessed to being on the bridge that day. He also admitted that he was dressed just like Bridge Guy. Yep. Yeah, no one else made him do that. No one made him do that back then. There was no Odinists or Odinites back. You know what I mean? That wasn't until he was in Westville. That's what he's saying. Of course, another source of information of what time Richard Allen was on the trails that day is Richard Allen himself. As discussed previously in this memorandum, Richard Allen told Liggett that he, Richard Allen, arrived on the trails around noon and left around 1:30. This was information that Liggett concealed from Judge Denier. Richard's black Ford Focus was not parked at the CPS parking lot building at 2:15, according to Betsy Blair. This was also information that Liggett concealed from Judge Denier. Liggett also failed to inform Judge Denier that DNR Dan cannot be trusted to perform the most basic of tasks when conducting an investigation. Get the name right. Liggett swearing under oath that Richard Allen was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30, based upon Dan Dolan's lost and unrecorded interview, may not be the best benchmark for Judge Denier to rely on. Unfortunately, Judge Denier would not know the unreliability of Dolan's report because Liggett never let him know. 2. Richard Allen owns a blue coat, as do millions of other men. 3. Richard Allen owns guns, as do millions of other men. Knives, as do millions of other men. Number 5, his black Ford Focus was parked at CPS building between 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. As the court knows by now, at 2:15 p.m., Betsy Blair observed a vehicle parked at the old CPS lot that resembled a 1965 non-black Comet with an angular design. This was not Richard Allen's vehicle. More importantly, Tony Liggett concealed this fact from Judge Denier. Number 6, Betsy Blair observed a man on a bridge that Liggett claimed was Richard Allen. As the court knows by now, the man that Betsy Blair observed on the bridge was a 20-year-old kid with brown poofy hair that did not resemble Rick Allen. This is not surprising considering that Rick Allen left the Monon Trail at 1:30 and therefore was not on the high bridge when Betsy Blair observed the 20-year-old kid. Rick's black Ford Focus was not at the CPS lot at 2:15, which is further evidence that Rick Allen was not on the bridge as he had already left the trails. Again, Liggett concealed that Betsy Blair identified a young man on the bridge and not Rick Allen. Number 7, Sarah Carball observed a man walking down the road that Liggett claims 1 was Rick Allen and also 2 the same man that Betsy Blair viewed on High Bridge. As the court knows by now, Sarah Carball observed a man wearing a tan jacket, a tan coat and muddy pants. This man does not meet the description of the man that Betsy Blair observed on the bridge, which according to Liggett is the same man that Carball observed on 300 North. And because Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was not at the CPS lot at 2:15 p.m. when Betsy Blair passed by and saw a 1965 Comet-looking car at the CPS lot, Richard Allen could not have been the man walking down 300 North. Liggett lied to Judge Denier when Liggett claimed that the 2017 Sarah Carball observed a man with a blue coat and muddy and bloody clothing. So conclusion of part 5. Richard Allen is not connected to these horrific murders in any way. Liggett attempted to convince Judge Denier that evidence of the murders would be found in Rick's home over 5 years after the girls were slain based upon the 7 enamored reasons identified above. If Liggett had been honest, then Judge Denier would not have signed the warrant. Liggett wasn't honest, though. Richard's lack of any connection whatsoever to the crime scene, combined with Liggett's lies and concealments, merit a Franks hearing. And then this is the conclusion. To prevail on its request for the court to set this matter for a Franks hearing, the defense must take a substantial preliminary showing that omitted or false statements were made knowingly or intentionally or with reckless disregard. If the court concludes that omitted facts or false statements were necessary for finding a probable cause, the court should set a hearing on defendant's request. Franks versus Delaware. Indiana's Girth Court actually provided a simple way to assess whether a Franks hearing is justified. Is the concealment and false information contained in the brief the type of information that any reasonable person would have known? Was the kind of thing the judge would wish to know? The defense provided a very, very long and detailed analysis of the facts because the court must determine whether evidence exists that Liggett acted intentionally or that Liggett acted with reckless disregard. The defense believes that the very long and detailed analysis of the facts was necessary to provide a very strong foundation from which this court could conclude that Liggett acted intentionally or with reckless disregard. Or more simply put, the very detailed analysis of the facts allow the court to conclude that yes, the omitted information and false information identified in the memorandum is the type of information that Judge Denier would have wanted to know before signing the warrant. Wherefore, Richard Allen, by and through his attorneys, Andrew J. Baldwin and Bradley A. Rossi, request this court set this case for a Franks hearing, at which time the defense will be asking for the search warrant to be deemed illegal and the fruits of the illegal warrant to be suppressed. Respected, So we did it. Yeah, Chopper. So that's what we're going to do next. We're actually, let's see what time it is. We got some time. Okay, we're doing good on time. Because I want to do a live tonight, but I have some errands to run. So I'm trying to get caught up on everything because there's been arrest and everything else and oh my gosh, all these cases. So I did put on my community tab and I forgot to put on there Crystal Rogers. I forgot to add her as one of the cases we could have covered tonight. But I did put on the community tab which case you guys wanted to go over. I think it was like Idaho. Suzanne Morphew. There's a new Nancy Grace on that. Oh, and then you know how we were watching the Alec Murdaugh documentary series? They put out a 4th video of the documentary. So those were the 3 that I thought we could watch, do one of those tonight. So this is the state's response to Richard Allen's defense lawyers' claims that Odinist were the ones that in fact committed these crimes, then wasn't their client, Richard Allen. So I figured we would watch this and we will talk about it in the chat. Oh, thank you, Chopper, for becoming a member. Thank you. Okay. Yep. If you guys wouldn't mind just hitting the like button, it really does help. So we'll watch this. It's a little bit longer. So, and look, I was right there the other day. I was right by the CVS. I showed you guys pictures of that yesterday.
Town of Delphi, Indiana. It's not a place where you worry when your teenage kids decide to go on an adventure. So when Abby Williams and her best friend, Libby German, decided to go on a hike near the Monon High Bridge in the middle of the day, no one thought it was dangerous. But when Libby and Abby did not show up when they were supposed to get picked up, their families began to worry, and they began to search. Then the next day, the worst news possible. The bodies of these 2 girls were found, both victims of murder. Then after 5 frustrating years, this man, Richard Allen, was arrested for killing both girls. This was a case with many suspicious people and many rumors, but none of them ever involved Allen, which surprised many people. Allen says he didn't do it and also alleges that it was a group of Odinists who are responsible. Tonight, we will take a step back and look at the evidence that was used to obtain probable cause to search Allen's home for evidence. Then we'll look at the evidence they seized. Does it point to Allen, or is there more evidence of some Nordic religious white nationalist group who is responsible? We'll break down the evidence as our investigation of the Delphi murders continues. I'm Benny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. A big hour tonight as we dive into the Delphi murder case. There is still so much information to go through that has just been released last week by the defense. Each night, a different approach that we're taking. Tonight, I want to start with the Constitution of the United States, which protects us all, right, from the government, from unreasonable search and seizure, as well as many other things, right? Protects us from the government. And the reason it's important and it's significant is we don't want police, the government, just knocking on our door or breaking down our doors and looking around for evidence to see if we're up to and doing anything wrong. I mean, that goes completely contrary to the foundation of this country and what it's about, the freedoms that we have and the limitations that the government has. And this is a big part of it, these unreasonable search and seizures. So in order to search your home, there has to be a showing. There has to be some level of evidence, probable cause, that convinces a judge to sign a warrant. And that's a hurdle. Now, it's not the highest hurdle in our system of justice by far, but it is a hurdle. And it's there to protect us and to protect innocent people from being targeted by the government and you know, being the intrusion and the violation of the sanctity of our homes. So in this case, the search of Richard Allen's home is a big, big deal. That's because Richard Allen wants evidence excluded. So this is interesting. He wants evidence excluded. And this is pretty standard in most cases. A defense attorney gets it and says, all right, what evidence do they have? Did they get it lawfully? Right? And sometimes it's really significant. The evidence that they get, you know, connects the defendant to the crime and can be used against them in a court of law to convince a jury. So we see it in almost every case that these motions to suppress evidence, to keep evidence out, are done. And generally it's a move. When I look at, you know, a defendant looking to suppress evidence, it's because the focus is this is a case where there's not enough evidence, right? They want the jury to come back and say not guilty because there's not enough evidence to connect him, the defendant, to the murder. Now, not guilty is the standard in a trial. You're either guilty or not guilty. There's no mention of innocence other than the presumption that every defendant brings into the courtroom. But the not guilty is not a stamp by the jury saying, we believe you're innocent. It's that because that's not what you're judging. It's that the state, the government, the prosecution did not prove their case, didn't prove the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. But this case is a little different because of what we've learned in this last week is that the defendant, Richard Allen, isn't just saying you don't have the evidence and I'm not guilty because you can't prove it, right? Maybe I did it, but you can't prove it. He's saying I didn't do it. It was the Odinists, the Odinites, or the Odinists. They refer to them both ways that actually did it, which means they are proclaiming not that you can't prove it. They are proclaiming he is innocent. Someone else did it, and we're telling you who it is. Yet they still want this evidence excluded. Now, that's a defense attorney doing his job. I understand it. And you know, standing up for your client's constitutional rights all makes sense. However, it's different. Like if somebody else did it, why would this evidence that you're trying to get excluded prove the case against you? Why would it? Something to think about. Something to think about as we try to process this concept that was just dropped on all of us by the defense in what they filed inside the courtroom, saying, we know exactly who's responsible, this group of Odinists. They name them in their papers. We don't name them on the show, but they name them in the papers that they filed in court. But they're still very concerned about this other evidence that they want tossed, excluded from the case.
And I guess they're afraid that that evidence could prove that he did it. But if he's factually innocent and it was the Odinist, I mean, how could that evidence prove that he did it? That's interesting, right? So I think what they're looking at, though, is the key evidence is this gun. There's a bullet found at the scene, and matching that bullet found at the scene that is cycled through the weapon, allegedly, and somehow the experts will look at that and be able to say, oh, yeah, it was cycled through his gun that we seized from his house. And the defense does not want that evidence in front of the jury. Is that enough to prove him guilty? Maybe, maybe not. I have a feeling that the defense expert is going to say, you can't tie that bullet to the gun through that testing, but there's going to be a battle. But they want that gun excluded so the jury doesn't even hear any of that evidence. So that's what's going on. So let's dive into this, and let's go back to the timeline, because I want to take a step back tonight. February 2017. This is key. This is crucial. Richard Allen, the defendant, the man accused of this double murder, calls a tip line to provide law enforcement information about what he saw on the trail that day. That's a big fact. I'm sure the defense is going to make a big deal about it. He's the one who reaches out and calls the tip line. Okay, also in February 2017, this is going to be a big name in this case. A Department of Natural Resources officer, Dan Dulin, meets Richard Allen at a grocery store, not sure why it's a grocery store, in Delphi, and prepares his report. Okay? So he calls the tip line, I've got information. Dan Dulin, the resource officer, natural resources officer, meets Richard Allen at the grocery store. Now, let's go to the probable cause affidavit, and this is sort of a summary of what Dan Dulin apparently told the officer who filled out the affidavit. Mr. Allen was on the trail between 13:30 and 15:30. That's 1:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. He parked at the Old Farm Bureau building and walked to the New Freedom Bridge. While at the Freedom Bridge, he saw 3 females. He noted one was taller and had brown or black hair. He did not remember the description, nor did he speak to them. He walked from the Freedom Bridge to the High Bridge. He did not see anybody, although he stated he was watching a stock ticker on his phone as he walked. He stated there were vehicles parked at the High Bridge trailhead. However, he did not pay attention to them. He did not take any photos or video. His cell phone did not list an IMEI, but did have the following, and there are 2 numbers. Potential follow-up information. Who were the 3 girls walking in the area of the Freedom Bridge? Okay, so that's from the officer, the narrative from the officer who interviewed Richard Allen at the grocery store. Now, back to the timeline. September 2022, while reviewing evidence in the investigation into the murders of Abby and Libby, investigators discover a 2017 interview between Dan Dulin and Richard Allen. Like, not till September of 2022 do they take a look at this and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should look at this. He was there. He was there. And then October 13th of 2022, Richard Allen gives a voluntary videotaped interview with law enforcement. He states he arrived at the trail around noon and left it around 1:30. Crucial difference here. Crucial difference. According to Dulin, in his report, it's between 1:30 and 3:30. Good for the prosecution. When he's interviewed on video, Richard Allen says noon to 1:30, bad for the prosecution. All right, let's bring in our guests, help work our way through all of this. Here with us tonight in Montgomery, Alabama, prosecutors and co-hosts of the Prosecutors Podcast, the award-winning Prosecutors Podcast, Alice LaCour and Brett Talley. Great to see you. I missed you down at CrimeCon. And in Indianapolis, Indiana, hosts of the Murder Sheet Podcast, Anya Kane and Kevin Greenlee. Great to see you. All right, Anya and Kevin, let me begin here. Am I getting this right, that we've got a discrepancy now between the time and Officer Dulin is saying one time he told me, and then on video he's saying another time?
Yes, there is a discrepancy there between the times. And that is so important because we also know for a fact what time the girls were kidnapped. They were kidnapped at 2:13 p.m. So if we take Richard Allen at his word, by 2:13, he's not there anymore. He's gone. He's not at the crime scene. But if you take Dan Dulin at his word about what he reported originally, at the crucial time of 2:13 p.m., Richard Allen was still present at the crime scene.
All right, Alice, this makes Dan Dulin, the natural resources officer, perhaps the most important witness in this case.
Well, this is a very interesting thing because we have a report from a resource officer closer in time to when the events occurred. We say this all the time. The prosecution sees this. Whenever you have witnesses, memories fade, and that is completely normal. And so there hasn't been any showing that Officer Dulin misremembered when he wrote the report. If anything, it's possible that Richard Allen's story has changed. We see this often with witnesses. It's not uncommon for 5 years later for someone's memory to fade, especially when we're talking about a difference of a couple of hours. And you remember, now we're 5 years later, and Richard Allen first spoke to police right after the girls were murdered, and there was no follow-up. 5 years later, when police come knocking on the door, if you had already spoken to the police and now 5 years later, when there's been no developments in a case, the police come knocking again, you may begin to think that you are higher on a suspect list than before. You may have an incentive to change your story, or completely innocuously, you've simply forgotten dates and times after 5 years. So this doesn't definitively show that Officer Dulin's report was faulty, nor does it necessarily put Officer Dulin in the middle of any sort of controversy, though the defense would like you to believe that.
Oh, absolutely. Brett, take a look at this. This is from the defense memorandum, which exploded last week. The single solitary source for this information, and they're talking about why you shouldn't trust Dan Dulin here. Allen being on the trail from 1:30 to 3:30 is Dan Dulin from the Department of Natural Resources. In order to confidently trust that Richard Allen actually said that he was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30, Dan Dulin's work product would have to be trusted. Dulin was so sloppy in drafting this report that he put Richard Allen's name into the system as Rick Allen Whiteman. And I believe Whiteman is the name of the street that he lives on. Find attached Exhibit 124, which is a report provided to the defense in discovery from DNR, Dan, concerning his interview of Richard Allen. In this report, Dan wrote the following: I checked my audio recordings and cannot find one for him. I will keep looking because I am sure I recorded every interaction I had related to my assigned leads. All right, Brett, how much of a problem is this if he doesn't find that? He records everything, but this is the one he can't find.
Well, look, it's obviously a problem, and there's a reason the defense wanted to focus on it. They filed a motion to suppress, and instead they gave us their full rundown of what their defense at trial is going to be. And the thing about it is, it's not as if Dan Dulin had some incentive to lie about this. It's not as if he wrote this report and then immediately ran to the police and said, this is the guy. It was so unimportant to him that he finished his report, he filed it away, and he didn't think about it again for 5 years. Is that a problem for his credibility? Yes, but I think the defense is going to have trouble explaining why he would misreport this. And obviously, Richard Allen has every reason in the world 5 years later, when he's being investigated by the police and interviewed by the police, to change his story, to take himself off that bridge. Richard Allen's own statements put him on the bridge at exactly the time he would need to be there, wearing exactly the clothes that were described by people who saw Bridge Guy, matching the clothes in the video. This is a huge problem for Richard Allen. It's not surprising that they'll attack Dan Dulin, but I think he's going to do just fine.
So Anya and Kevin, Dan Dulin. So when does the video come out relative to all of this? Because if I'm an investigator in the case and I've interviewed people, and I interviewed someone who said he was there, and then a video comes out of the killer, according to investigators, I would want to think, did I interview anyone that looks like that?
Yes. And so it's complicated, and I need to check my notes to
Sure.
figure out exact date. But I know an image, a still image from the video came out, I believe, within days of the murders. So we were all seeing the still image of this person walking on the bridge. And then I believe sometime later it was sort of
So it's not years, it's not
video.
years later. So it's not like 4 years later, there's an image of the killer that is public to everyone, you know, investigators and the public at large. It's like right around the time of all of this. So any investigator who's on the case or anyone who lives in Delphi is going to kind of know what this guy looked like.
Right. I think I will underscore with this investigation, it starts as a missing persons investigation. They're looking for 2 hurt girls. So it brings in all these different law enforcement resources. Everybody's running around. I will be curious to see if there were issues in terms of, you know, case management perspective. So many people working on it, things may be getting lost in the shuffle, which is understandable given how it started, but, you know, may play a role in this situation.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that shuffle. I mean, this is the highest profile case that everyone involved has ever worked on. People around the world were following this and looking for information. And we didn't think that a guy who said he was there deserves this. I mean, a second look, like in March or in April or 1 year later, Alice, 2 years later, 3. I mean, I don't understand. There are podcasters flooding the zone. Dateline, 48 Hours, everyone in the world. Like, you spoke to someone who said he was there. I mean, how many people were there that, Alice, there could have been that many men who said they were actually there that day. This baffles me. It baffles me.
I mean, it's incredibly unfortunate that there wasn't follow-up on it, but I think you've touched on something very important here. This was a devastating case as soon as it happened. It grasped the entire nation, the entire world's attention. And there were jurisdictions upon jurisdictions, the local, the state, the federal jurisdictions, all coming in to try and find these girls and try to bring the perpetrator off the streets. With that, when there are multiple jurisdictions, the reality of red tape is real. There are a lot of papers. There were a lot of leads being followed up on. And note who Officer Dulin is. He's not the FBI. He's not the lead investigator. He's a resource officer. This isn't even probably typically his duty to be interviewing potential murder suspects or even witnesses to murders. We started this entire segment with the pre-roll of how small Delphi, Indiana is. It's absolutely true. There are communities like this all over the United States that have never seen anything as tragic as this. And it's true that those jurisdictions don't typically have the resources or necessarily the savvy to carry out an investigation with so many different prongs, so many different aspects to it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't happen, that things get lost in the shuffle here. I'm glad that they went back 5 years later when they still hadn't made an arrest to go through all those old notes and someone found this. But if you remember at the time that this happened in 2017, the hotlines were being flooded. Tips were coming in from left and right. They were coming in from online, from Facebook, from,
I understand, but he was there. He said he was there. And what's the irony of all of this is that this is the foundation of the prosecution's case 5 years later. This is so huge, ladies and gentlemen. He said he was there, yet it wasn't so huge that we didn't think it was like a hot lead 5 years ago. I don't understand that. If it was a local reporter, they'd be jumping up and down saying, like Anya and Kevin, if you knew, when you started your podcast, right? And you knew that someone said that they were there. How many men said that they were there on the trail that day?
I know of at least 2 off the top of my head. It's definitely a big deal, although
it's
honestly,
like you can count them on one hand, I'm sure, right?
It's not a lot.
I'm just going to say, when me and Vincent were there, we were there around the same time. It was I think I said it on the video. I think it was like 2 p.m. So between 1:30 and 3:30, we were there right in the middle. And we did see people on the trail. We saw 2 guys that were walking at different times, like they were alone. So we saw them like, I would say maybe 5 minutes apart. And then we walked by, there was 2 women and they had a baby with them. So there were people definitely out on the trail when we were there.
Brett, and again, prosecutors can only prosecute the case that's handed to them by investigators, right? Like you rely on them. It's not like on TV. TV, sometimes the prosecutors are there and they're like investigating the case. That's not really the way it works. Like, how do you explain that to a jury? Ladies and gentlemen, this is why you need, because you have to build up the credibility of this man, at the same time explain why he spoke to one of the 3 or 4 men who said that they were there at the time, and this guy happens to have the same build as the guy on the video. How do you do that? How do you explain the lack of this investigation and build up his credibility to understand all the details at the same time?
I think it's like anything else, and you've done this before, and I think every prosecutor's done it, every attorney. You have to tell a story, and I think that story is basically the one that Alice told. There were a whole lot of people working a whole lot of hours trying to make this happen. Was it a mistake? Absolutely. Was it pernicious? Obviously not. They were doing the best they could. They made a huge mistake. They wish they hadn't. They wish they could have solved this 5 years ago, but things happen. These were real human beings, and I think you lay out exactly how intense this investigation was, how hard everybody was working, and you help the jury understand how a slip up like this could happen. But I think it's going to be very hard for the defense to say that this is pernicious in some way, or this was intentional, or this is part of some complete police conspiracy.
No, I think it's
pretty
just,
clearly.
I just think they're going to attack this officer and say, can you really trust this officer in remembering 1:30 to 3:30 versus noon to 1:30? I think that's what it's going to come down to. But we'll see. Everyone, stay where you are. Great panel tonight. Alice LaCour with us, Brett Talley, Anya Kane, Kevin Greeley. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the evidence that was seized as a result of the search, plus coming up next hour.
In Park City, Utah, handling fentanyl.
That video and the audio as well, crucial. There's more to the video. There's more to the audio. We'll see it at the trial. But that's what was released publicly. We knew very little. We had these sketches that didn't make any sense. But now we're hearing from both sides what they think happened here, and it's something completely different. Let's go back to the state now. This is their objection to the defense's motion to suppress. These are the reasons why they believe the evidence, the search was lawful. The search of Richard Allen's home was lawful. They say investigators believed a firearm was involved in the abduction and murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German because of an unspent .40 caliber round was found between the bodies of Abigail and Liberty. That investigators believed a knife was used in the murder of Abigail Williams, that the clothes that Richard Allen described wearing the day he was on the trails matched the description of the man seen on the bridge from the video taken by Libby's phone. That based on this information, investigators prepared a probable cause affidavit with a search warrant for the home of Richard Allen. That makes sense, right? He says he was there, unspent cartridge, he's got guns, he's got knives, he's wearing the same clothes. That should be enough for probable cause. So here's what they seized in part from all of this. A black Sig Sauer P226 .40 caliber handgun, one .40 caliber S&W cartridge, one .40 caliber S&W cartridge from inside the Sig Sauer, 2 magazines containing .40 caliber cartridges, multiple sweatshirts, jackets, hats, gloves, boots, numerous knives, multi-tools, multiple laptops, hard drives, flash drives, memory cards, cell phones, but it's 5 years later. Cutting of a carpeted area underneath the spare tire of the Ford Focus, swabs of the driver lap belt and the driver's shoulder belt of the Ford Focus. Blood, could be blood there. 2 swabs from the passenger side of the carpeted floorboards. Okay, let's bring back in our guests. Alice LaCour, Brett Talley from the award-winning podcast, The Prosecutors. Make sure you download it. And from the Murder Sheet podcast, you've already downloaded that, Anya Kane and Kevin Greenlee. Okay, Anya and Kevin, anything from this search warrant Other than the gun linking to this bullet through their testing, is there anything else from that search that we know that's been released publicly that connects Richard Allen to the scene, to the murder, that could be evidence that we expect would be used against him?
As far as we know, the only information that's been released publicly is that gun that they recovered from Richard Allen's residence, which they ballistically link, they say, to a bullet found at the crime scene. And that bullet is absolutely crucial to their case against him because it is the one piece of physical evidence that puts Richard Allen at the crime scene at the time of the murders.
So, Brett, are you shocked, number one, that we're not talking about DNA? We're talking about a bullet that is not used to kill anyone. It's not discharged, but it sort of cycles through the gun. They say they've got an expert that's going to match it. I've heard mixed reviews from people I've spoken to about how compelling that evidence is. What are your thoughts about that evidence versus expectations of a jury, which is a bloody scene, a horrible scene, yet we've got no DNA?
I think one thing I would say is the prosecution's going to have an opportunity to put on a case. We don't know that we have DNA. The prosecution's also under a gag order. And unlike the defense, the prosecution hasn't laid out its entire case in a filing. The defense filing is 135 pages long. They're trying to suppress this gun, and they don't make the argument to suppress it until page 105. And on cite a case until page 135. Prosecution responds with 8 pages. 8 pages of law and facts. They don't lay out anything. They just go directly at the legal question. So I don't think we can say that we don't have DNA. I don't think we can say what the prosecution has. The defense knows. They're starting to see that discovery. And I think it's interesting that as they're seeing that discovery, you don't get a full-throated suppression motion. You get a press release that was designed and successfully did so to inflame the passions of the public and social media.
Let me ask you, Alice, if they had DNA from the scene, would part of what they wanted in the search would have been a swab from Richard Allen as well?
Not necessarily, because when you're searching, they can get DNA from multiple places. It's possible they already have a swab from Richard Allen. If they knew that they were going to bring a charging document against Richard Allen when he was arrested, part of the intake process for any defendant is to take a swab. So they may not have wanted to spend that sort of capital in the affidavit when they were looking for something else. So I think that's exactly right, that we don't know whether they already had Richard Allen's DNA. And second of all, if they knew where they were going to bring charges and to arrest him, they knew they were going to be able to get his DNA no matter what.
So Anya and Kevin, any indication about anything? I mean, you've covered this case so in depth, looked at every single document that's been made public. And we know from the beginning, even from how much information was released in trying to catch a killer, that investigators and now prosecutors have released very little.
Yeah, they're definitely playing things close to the vest. And we would just say that, we're just kind of eager to see the back and forth between both sides and sort of see how it plays out. A lot of people in this case have been so quick to say, oh my gosh, it's over, or, the defense is over, the prosecution's over. I mean, we will say we've found one case at least where you did have a unspent round become pretty significant ballistic evidence within the case itself. And so it's not unheard of for that to be somewhat important.
So Alice down in CrimeCon, right? Talking to everybody. And there were 2 schools, right? There was the one school that said all of this stuff about Odinism, et cetera, is like way, way, way over the top. Then there was another school of thought that was like, what's going on here? Like, what is going on? What was your take on, and what are your thoughts about all of these allegations, very specific allegations about this so-called Nordic religious white nationalist group that for some reason allegedly murdered 2 teenage girls who happened to be white?
Look, I'm going to tell you, it is a fascinating story. It got all of us reading a 135-page document, and it grips you. It is a story that absolutely grips you. If it's true, we're all looking behind ourselves. Are there Odinists in our own backyards? So the prosecution did exactly what they meant to do, which is to get their story out there, or at least a story to sow confusion or to point in any direction but their own client. And that's what they're supposed to do. And it's, you can't fault them for wanting to put up a vigorous defense. What I believe the camp of people who had a problem with that really fantastic story was that it came in the wrong vehicle. It came in a Frank's motion hearing document, which is supposed to be about Richard Allen's search warrant, not about the theory of the case by the defense. They absolutely have the opportunity to tell their story, but it comes at a later time before a jury. They wanted to preempt that and start now. Because look, if the first time the rest of us heard about Odinists was at trial, most of us probably would have reacted the way we did on the first page of their motion, which is to laugh and say, what are you talking about? Are they being serious? So they're priming their story for the main stage later on.
All right, stay where you are. Things are going to get a little out of control when we come back because apparently prosecutors don't want cameras in the courtroom. And then they listed their reasons and I read it. What?
He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German.
Still an incredibly shocking day. This was, again, someone who wasn't even on the radar, Richard Allen. He's saying he is innocent. Prosecutors say they have the evidence on this guy. Big development, as we reported when it happened. The defense said, we want cameras in the courtroom. We want cameras in the courtroom. We want the public to see this case. Very unusual for the defense to want cameras in the courtroom. And lo and behold, the state's response. I couldn't believe it. I was floored. I was shocked. Take a look. The state's response to the defense motion for broadcasting. Broadcasting of pretrial and trial proceedings create the same concerns, if not more, given that an attorney is immune from libel proceedings for statements made in open court. So why is that a reason to keep cameras out of the courtroom? I'm trying to figure that one out. Let's bring back in our guests, Alice LaCour, Brett Talley, Anya Kane, and Kevin Greenlee. Brett, I'm really troubled by, and I know I have a conflict of interest working at Court TV. I get it. But I felt this way before I worked here. I thought our government was open and free, and we should see everything that happens that our government is doing. And my father thought the same thing. He was a federal judge, but they were prohibited by the Supreme Court of allowing cameras in the courtroom. But what does libel have to do with keeping cameras out of the courtroom? Is there anything? Like that, to me, that's utterly sophomoric and ridiculous. But is there something to it?
Well, I think I would say a couple of things. Number one, the courtroom's going to be open. People are going to be there. Reporters are going to be there. They're going to report on it. Lori Vallow case wasn't broadcast. I think it went just fine. I think these prosecutors don't want this turning into O.J. Simpson.
Okay, I'll stop you right there, Brett.
Anthony.
I'll stop you right there. What was wrong with Casey Anthony? What happened to Casey Anthony that was wrong? Who didn't get a fair trial?
Well, I mean, what happened in Casey Anthony? Who didn't get a fair trial? Well, the victim didn't get a fair trial in Casey Anthony, and I think that's the concern here. Their victims are going to be in that courtroom. They're 2 innocent girls.
So is it the victim or the defendant that doesn't get fair trials?
The defendant will have an open courtroom with the press reporting every single thing that happens. But what won't happen is the defense has already filed one motion that described Richard Allen as being treated like a prisoner of war and used a photograph of him in a workout shirt, and another motion that seeks to reinstate the satanic panic in an attempt to drive the public crazy. There are legitimate reasons for the prosecution to be concerned about what these defense attorneys will do if they get to perform in front.
They don't want
cameras.
the public to hear the defense speak. That's what it sounds like to me. Anya and Kevin, let me read the next one. Managing the broadcast media that is imposed in the court may become distracting, considering the number of media outlets that may request access to the broadcast. Does he know how it works? You put one outfit puts a camera in there, everyone else plugs into our feed. Like, I get it, Indiana, you never had cameras before, but we've been doing it since 1991. Not one case has been overturned based upon a camera in a courtroom. I can stack up the not guilties and the guilties. I have spoken to the jurors afterwards. They don't even notice the cameras in the courtroom. They base it on the evidence, and they listen to the judge when the judge gives them instructions on what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do.
Scream it to the people in the back, Vinny, over in Idaho. They need to hear it.
This next one has me. I told you it was going to get a little hot in here. Allowing cameras, here we go, it's the circus. Allowing cameras can create a circus atmosphere, both in person and online. Okay, so now the prosecutor wants to control what people can say online. I think we have an amendment about that. I think it's the first. Then he says 15-second clips can be taken out of context. What is the context? The context is the trial. You put a camera in there, the public sees the whole trial. Court TV's been doing it since 1991. I know I'm preaching to myself here, and I'm not mad at Brett. I'm not mad at Alice. I'm not mad at anyone. I'm just upset when members, public, people who work for the people don't want the people to see the work that they're doing. Because that's what it is. Anya, you look like you want to say something.
I do. I'm pro camera, but I will say this fits into the context of this case in that in the previous instance of this sort of news cycle happening, we had the defense release a very, very dramatic and, colorfully written transport demand for Richard Allen to be moved from prison. And then Nick McClellan put out a kind of a shorter response in a filing. And then he debunked a lot of it in a hearing where he was basically like, I don't really disagree with the defense, what they're asking for, but I'm going to smack them down based on what they're claiming about the case. So we see this as him essentially doing the same thing where he's saying, I don't really care that much because he says so in the filing. He's raising issues. He's not necessarily asking that Judge Gull ban cameras. He's just saying here would be the issues with it. So this seems very tailored to Judge Gull, who, of course, is a pioneering judge in the state. She was part of the pilot program to allow cameras in, so she might be inclined to do it based on that. But he's basically saying, I think it's him using this as an opportunity to like poke the eyes of the defense and say, you guys are grandstanders and you're being ridiculous. So I kind of see it more in that context, I suppose.
I get it. Alice, do you think they're going to want to control what the defense says at the trial? Like, I don't understand. I've never seen a prosecutor, and I'm a former prosecutor. And, on this show, people say, why do you always take the prosecution's side? Because most people are guilty that get indicted. I mean, the overwhelming majority of them are. That's just the facts, right? People don't like to hear that fact, but that is the fact. Why? What are we afraid of here? Like, the defense can make all these arguments, right? They're going to make arguments in front of the jury. I mean, that's all that matters is what happens in the courtroom. So I don't understand how a camera affects what arguments are made and aren't made in front of the 12 people who will decide what happened here.
I think those are all great points. And I actually, personally, because I don't live in Indiana, want a camera because I want to see it. But I actually think Anya is onto something. I think this is actually a more tailored filing. I think here, the prosecution is actually throwing a bunch of reasons at the judge to consider should the judge, and the judge may actually allow cameras in. This is kind of the prosecution's opportunity to say, don't forget all these things. And one thing I'd really like to note, and it comes on the second to last page of, I agree, a long litany of reasons that sometimes made me feel like I had whiplash. What I found really compelling was the fact that there's never been cameras in this courtroom, and they may not know how to control all the aspects of having cameras in the courtroom. Things to consider. This is a very gruesome, tragic murder of young girls. There will be witnesses who may be minors or witnesses who are vulnerable. There's going to be lots of sidebars. This is going to be a very sensitive trial with the type of information that's going to come out. And it takes a lot of, as you know from working on TV, a lot of choreographing to make sure that the cameras are aimed away from certain people at certain times, such as jurors.
Alice, we're out of time. I don't mean to be rude. I'm sorry, but we're out of time for this segment. But I will say this. We've done trials just like this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. We've got the library since 1991. It's nothing new. It might be new to Indiana, but it's relatively straightforward and simple. We don't show the jurors. If there's a minor, the judge says, all right, turn all the cameras away, period. It's easy. Sidebars, all microphones are down. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome. You got to come back. Award-winning podcasters, Alice Accor, Brett Talley, the prosecutors, Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee, Murder Sheet podcast. We'll see you next time.
Okay. So hopefully they will allow cameras in there because this case has been so secretive. It's just kind of like I don't compare cases. I mean, because every case is its own case. But with the Idaho 4 case, with everything being just so secretive in that case, it's kind of like with Delphi. They're both very tight to the vest, just keeping everything tight-lipped. I'm sure there's more evidence they have than what we know. So I'm going to jump off here because I do have to run some errands before we come back for the night live. So I'll be back around 8:15. If it's any later than that, it won't be any later than 9:15. It's going to be a shorter live this evening as well, so it won't be too long. But if you guys haven't gotten a chance to go over and I'm going to see what we're at. Go over to the community tab. Make sure you put your vote in for tonight for what case we're going to cover. As of right now, Susan Morphew is in the running, 42%. So we may just cover that case. But we have Idaho's 36%, new documentary on Alec Murdaugh, 22%. So they're very, very close. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you'd like to, we'd love to have you. We're 13 subscribers, Titans away from hitting 12,000 on the channel. So it's very exciting over here. But I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. If I don't see you this evening, but if I do, I'll see you later on tonight. I'm going to go get my nails done, I think. I need to, but I don't want to. Like, you never have to do something you just don't want to do. I don't feel like talking to anybody about what color to pick out or all that good stuff. I'd rather I wish I could just do them at home, but I'm not that crafty. So I'm going to run some errands, maybe get some food, and I will see you guys all around 8 o'clock. So bye, guys.